Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports, entertainment, and sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith, kicking off this edition of the podcast by bringing back one of our favorite segments, because it's time for Show Me the Money Lines, where we take a look at some of this weekend's NFL money lines and give you our betting picks. We begin on Sunday afternoon, where we've got a battle of 1-0 teams in the NFC North. Green Bay Packers take on the Minnesota Vikings. Pack the favorites at home, coming in at minus 155 on the money line. The Vikings carry plus 130 payout odds. Rick, which team comes away with the win?
I am going with the Vikings here. I believe that they look like the better team in week one. I know they were at home, but still they put it together for 4 quarters on both sides of the ball. Green Bay did not look good offensively. Defensively, they look good. But if we're going defensive battles, then we have to pick Minnesota because they're a better defense. Look what they did to Atlanta last week. They completely shut down what was supposed to be the resurgence of Matt Ryan in that offense. But not only that, Minnesota showed that they had a strong running game with Cook and Madison as a backup. You know, the Bears were able to get a consistent run game going against the Packers. I think Minnesota will have more success with that. They have 2 really good receivers that Green Bay is going to have to match up one-on-one. Minnesota has arguably the best shutdown corner in the league, and I think he can nullify Adams, which puts more pressure on the other younger receivers. I don't even think Green Bay is going to be able to run the ball, which means it's all going to be on Rodgers' shoulders. Who knows if the line's going to hold up for 4 quarters. Give me the Vikings to win this game.
This one was tough. I was into Minnesota before the season. Last week didn't do anything to make me think otherwise. I will take the Vikings as well, just because they did have a pretty well-rounded attack. I'm not super crazy about the notion that Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw the ball more. I think the Packers will make him beat them, as opposed to the Falcons, who just let Dalvin Cook run all over him last week. But Green Bay, the offense is going to be pretty one-dimensional. I think Aaron Rodgers is capable of doing it all. I'm just not sure he's capable of doing it all against this defense. I just think Minnesota's a more well-rounded team top to bottom. If I were betting on this, I would just take the value that comes with the Vikings on the money line.
Yep, I agree with you guys. I'm taking Minnesota, especially with the better than 1-to-1 payout odds. I think that they are probably the better team of the two, especially at this early stage in the season. I know that we were all picking Chicago to win a week ago against Green Bay in week 1. And it's not like Green Bay was some amazing just force to be reckoned with offensively in that game. It will be interesting to see what Minnesota's rushing attack does against the Packer defense. But I think that Minnesota's defense will be able to slow down Green Bay. And they only scored, was it 14 points last week in that game? 10. So, yeah, I mean, they're a 2-score offense. Taylor's playing sounds and music on his computer again. It's officially a podcast once that happens. So, yeah, I'm taking Minnesota. I think better than 1-to-1 payout odds too really helps with that. If both teams were minus 110, there might be a little bit more value on Green Bay, but I think the value is on Minnesota this week. Also on Sunday afternoon, a rematch of last season's NFC Championship game, the New Orleans Saints battling the Los Angeles Rams. Rams, the slight favorites in LA, they post at minus 130. That compared to New Orleans plus 110 payout odds. Taylor, who are you going with?
I'll take the Rams. I took Carolina to beat them last week. LA was impressive. They stopped Cam Newton pretty well. Christian McCaffrey ran all over them, so it wouldn't be surprising if Alvin Kamara did the same this week. But the Saints weren't overly impressive either. I think they probably should have lost that game. They got pretty lucky that the Texans were playing soft coverage on that last drive, because the Texans want to do everything they possibly can to disappoint me in prime time. So they came through in that regard. But I'm taking LA. The Saints have the revenge factor, but I had a bold prediction in an article I wrote for some other site before the season that the Saints would make the playoffs. I kind of think week 1 didn't do much to make me think they're better than I expected. So it should be a fun game, but I'll take the Rams at home.
Yeah, I'm going with the Rams also. You know, they went across country, and we talked about West Coast to East Coast and how that can be difficult at times. And they played a really good Carolina defense and a really good Carolina team overall. And surprisingly, it was the Rams defense that played better than their offense. Like, they contained Cam Newton pretty much for the entire game. I know Carolina came back and kept it close in the fourth quarter, but still, the Rams defense actually looked like the best unit out of all 4 units on the field. And that surprised me because people thought that defense wasn't going to be as good as last year. With that said, I don't even think the Saints have a defense. It looks like they're back to just giving up 30 points a game and outscoring their opponents. And if that's the case, that plays right into the Rams' hands at home, where they can go up and down the field. They got 3 wide receivers that they can throw the ball to. Brown has come in and shown that he's a capable backup behind Gurley, so they have a 1-2 punch. The Rams just appear to be the better team right now in terms of both sides of the ball. And you know what? They still won despite not looking that good on offense. Goff did not have a great game at Carolina. He had actually, I would say, a sub-average game against Carolina, and they still won. Give me the Rams at home, where they're pretty much unbeatable over the last couple of years. I can't see how they're going to lose in what should be a fun, high-scoring game.
I'm very much looking forward to this contest. I'm also going to be taking the Rams in this game. I think that they are probably the more well-rounded team, as you guys were getting to. The Rams provide more. I don't really know how much of the revenge factor really would play into a game like this. It's not in New Orleans. I could see if this game was in the Superdome that the Saints fans might impact the way that this game would turn out. But it's in L.A. The Rams, I think, are the better team of these two. I think they're going to pick up the win. Let's go to the Sunday night football game from week 2. The Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Atlanta Falcons. This one, of course, being played down in Georgia. Eagles is slight favorite on the road. They come in at minus 130 on the money line. Falcons plus 110. Rick, which Birds team picks up the W and pays out this week?
You know, I'm going probably against the grain here, and I'm actually going to take the Falcons to win. I know they looked terrible last week against Minnesota, but Philadelphia played Washington, and they were down big for half the game. They got some long passes to Deshaun Jackson that got him into the game, then got him down the field, and then eventually put him in a position to win the football contest. I don't see that happening this week at Atlanta. Now, if it's going to be a shootout like last week was with Washington and Philly, you have to like Atlanta's chances. Julio Jones is the best receiver in the NFL because he's taller and faster than Hopkins. The best receiver in the NFL, and Ridley and Julio combined are arguably the best duo in the league, better than Hopkins and Fuller's for Houston. And, you know, if Matt Ryan can play, you know, better than last week, and that offensive line isn't going up against as great of a defensive line as they went up against the front 7 of Minnesota, they have all the chances here at home to do something significant and give some life to their season and fly and soar and not make a joke of themselves again. I'm going with Atlanta.
I think I would take the value if I were betting on it with Atlanta too. Plus 110 at home is pretty good. We're not going to see that very often. They weren't a great home team last year. They lost to the Bengals at home. They barely beat Tampa Bay and the Giants at home. So I'm not super confident about that. But I do think Philly looked vulnerable in week 1. They got lucky that Washington was just hapless enough to let them back into the game. I do like the Deshaun Jackson deep threat that the offense now has. They didn't really have that last season so much. But while I'm bullish on Philly in the long term, I do think, you know, they're not going to go undefeated. I think going to Atlanta is probably one of the tougher games on their schedule. So if I were betting, I would just put a little bit on Atlanta. But I don't feel great about it either way.
I understand the value of a Falcons bet in this case. I understand the idea that Philadelphia looked a little rough, to say the very least, at times in that week 1 game against Washington. It's not like Atlanta didn't look more than rough in their week 1 game. I also made the mistake of picking them last week, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to say the Eagles are going to win this game. I think that they'll be the better team in the long term. This is one of the tougher places to play for an NFC team, certainly when you're talking about the Eagles' schedule for this year. I still think Philly comes away with the win. I do agree with you that the value play might be Atlanta, that there is good value when you're getting better than 1-1. Atlanta at home, they should be a good team. They should win, 6 of their home games this year? 6 out of 8 in all likelihood. I think that that's a good option. I think the Eagles are going to win this game as far as a prediction goes. I don't know if I'd be confident enough to place a normal-sized wager on that, but I do think the Eagles are going to win this game. Plus, we got to disagree on something, so I'm going to take the Eagles. And, it's fly Eagles fly. It's not fly Falcons fly, Rick, just to get that out there.
They can all fly. All the bird teams.
They can all fly.
Everybody can fly, even the Bills against the Jets. So that was last week. So Monday Night Football this week, battle of the 0-1 teams. Oh, it's an early season thriller. Cleveland Browns will be the 3-point favorites on the spread, coming in at -145 on the money line against the New York Jets. The hosting Jets worth +125 odds for a win. These odds may not have been updated since it was discovered that their star quarterback, their young quarterback, is out reportedly with mono and will be supposedly missing multiple weeks with that illness. Taylor, we know you're a Browns fan. I don't think you have to be a Browns fan to pick the Browns this week. But are you picking the Browns this week?
I was fully prepared to not pick the Browns because I'm not, in fact, a Browns fan. I'm a fan of an equally bad team. But, with Darnold being out, they have to turn to Trevor Siemian, which is not great. Le'Veon Bell also has a shoulder injury. He may well miss this game. It's hard to pick the Jets, even at home, if they're missing their top running back and quarterback. Le'Veon Bell is really the only reason for optimism with this offense other than Darnold, if you're a believer in Darnold. So the fact that they're both potentially going to be off the field obviously tilts toward Cleveland. The odds probably reflect that more than they initially did at this point. So if the Browns are something like -160 by the time this game kicks off, I don't know if I'd want to take that. But in terms of a straight win or loss pick, you have to take Cleveland, I think.
I was fully prepared to go with the Jets until Sam Darnold had to run around town and get the kissing disease, which, by the way, I had in high school. So we'll just throw that out there. With that said, yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I feel for Darnold. Okay, I feel for Sammy. Okay, I feel for Sam. I know how it can be. I know how hard it is. With that said, I can't see the Jets winning. That defense played great last week versus Buffalo, but they proved that not even a great defensive performance can win a game if their offense can't do much, because Buffalo came back and won that, by the way. And I just don't see Cleveland putting up two stinkers in a row. They have too much talent on the offense to play that bad again. I think Baker Mayfield will have a bounce-back game. I think the entire Cleveland team is going to come out looking much better than they did last week versus the Titans, and you have to go with Cleveland here. I would say they cover the spread, they cover the money line, no matter what it goes up to. Cleveland's going to win this game easily.
I wasn't prepared to take the Jets even before the Darnold news came out. I figured Cleveland's going to win this game. I think Sam Darnold is a good quarterback. Bell is a really talented running back, adds a lot to that Jets offense when he's able to play. But I know that week one was a horror show if you're a Browns fan. They might burn the city down if the Browns lose this game against the Jets. I got to say Cleveland, too. I was going to say that ahead of time. I don't think the Jets are that good. I think the Browns are still in that 7-9 to 9-7 range, depending on how their season goes, based on week one, closer to 7-9. But we'll see. There is a prop bet that's available on BetOnline that we need to touch on really quick. Will the Miami Dolphins have the first overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft? The yes pays out at -140, so that is the betting favorite. And the no is even money, +100. Rick, the yes still has to be the better play here, right?
I can't even believe the odds are this small. Like, how is it not at least -200 or higher? The Dolphins are Drew, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I love you. But the Dolphins are the worst team I've seen in the NFL since the winless Detroit Lions.
Oh, I know it.
They're horrible. They gutted that team. Not even Fitzmagic has enough magic to get that team to more than 2 wins. Like, I don't even see them getting to 2 wins. They'd be lucky to get 1. There's no way they don't get the first overall pick next year. These odds are only going to continue to rise. Get on it now, because if you look at the landscape of the league, even with the Jets without Darnold, when he comes back halfway through the season, they'll win multiple games. there's nobody, even Arizona, they got a tie. That'll still be better than the Miami's record. Like, there's no team in the NFL that's going to be as bad as Miami. Sorry, man.
Yeah, I would think being in the AFC East might help them, but I don't think it actually will. Like, that division sucks, but they suck so much that they just – like, it's hard to imagine them winning a game. I know the one game is kind of tainting our view a little bit. When they lose by 49 points, it's hard to think they could ever win a game. They'll come close at some point. I'm not sure what their schedule looks like outside of the division, but, you know, there will be some weeks where it's like, oh, Miami could win this game, kind of like the Browns a couple of years ago, and then they just will probably fall flat in the end. So, yeah, I think you still have to take yes here just because there's really no other team that grades out quite as poorly. Like, you have Cincinnati, who almost, you know, ekes their way into a random win in Seattle last week. Arizona, like you said, had a tie, which might be a better result than the Dolphins get all year long. Even if the Cardinals don't win another game, they have the tie in the bank, so they would at least be a little bit better than Miami. So it's not looking good for the Dolphins' win prospects, but it is looking good for them if they're hopeful to get the number one pick, which I imagine they are.
Yeah, I think that week one tie between Arizona and Detroit kind of solidifies the yes for the Dolphins because they could all match the rest of the season out. They could all go, 2-13 for the rest of the year or 1-14 for the rest of the year from week 2 onward. And the Dolphins would be the worst team because you figured in that week 1 game that you were going to show a little bit of separation, that one of those teams would get that win and be on their way to maybe a 3-win season, something to that extent, maybe a little bit better. But at the very least, one was going to have a win. One was still in the running to go 0-16 if they were that terrible. But neither is at this point. Neither can go 0-16. And the Dolphins just have to be as bad as the Cardinals or the Lions the rest of the year, assuming Cincinnati actually ends up getting a couple wins and a couple of other teams here and there. The only thing that I could really see where the Dolphins would not have the first overall pick is if Darnold and Bell end up missing a ton of time to the point that the Dolphins are able to record 2 wins against the Jets. Because that's the only way that I really see it happening, is that they would have to own the tiebreaker with the team that would be equally terrible. And that's the only way I see that happening, and I don't see that happening. So, the Dolphins, who are traditionally terrible at drafting, are going to hold the first overall pick, and I, as a Dolphins fan, well, I'm just moving on to college, I guess, or to college football or to the NHL or NBA or something. MLB playoffs are coming up. But before we get on to any of that kind of stuff, let's move to a quick segment that we're calling Picking Favorites, where we look at the games involving our favorite teams. All 3 of us have made picks for all 3 of these games, which we'll show you in just a minute. But I figure what we can each do is break down our favorite team's game for this weekend and say whether we think they're going to win or whether they're going to lose. Sound good? All right. Okay. So for me, as we just got into, that's the Miami Dolphins, who are 19.5-point underdogs at home against New England this week. And this is basically my feeling. If that spread becomes 24 points between now and Sunday, I'd still take it. I'd still take New England minus the points. The Dolphins lost by 49 to the Baltimore Ravens, who is a team that I think might contend for a playoff spot. And I was thrilled that it wasn't a worse defeat. That's basically the approach I took to that. I was like, oh, hey, they lost by less than 50. Isn't that awesome? This is the New England Patriots. It is a team that the Dolphins have had some success against down in years past, where they randomly win a game. They either debut the Wildcat against them and pull away a victory. Tom Brady tries to throw with his left hand for the 3rd time in 3 weeks, and it goes awry, and it's returned for a touchdown. Or Rob Gronkowski face plants at the 1-yard line, and the Dolphins score on the Miami Miracle like happened a year ago. I don't see that happening this year, even with all of the drama and the craziness going on with the Antonio Brown situation, with him being signed, all the baggage he brought from Oakland, the lawsuit that is now pending against him as of this recording, whether we don't know if he's going to be playing or if he's going to be on an exempt list or what. All of that, they're still the New England Patriots. They're not going to lose to Miami in week 2 when the Dolphins lost by 49 points to Baltimore. Take the Patriots to win straight up. I'd say take the Patriots minus however many points they want to take away. This is a team that I would go and give the book a few extra points on top of their line to get better payout odds than that. This is one of those games because I don't see New England winning by any less than 28 at this point. But that's just me. Taylor's favorite team is the Houston Texans, who are favored by 8.5 points this weekend against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, of course, have a new quarterback at the helm. Taylor, break it down for us and give us your pick for this game.
So the Texans should be 1-0. They played pretty well last week in New Orleans. Obviously came up short at the buzzer, but they get Jacksonville this week. Jacksonville lost Nick Foles, of course, with a broken collarbone, which means Gardner Minshew is now their quarterback. Raise your hand if you'd heard of him before last week. Of course, Rick will raise his hand. But anyway, the point stands that I think you're on mute or something. But Texans are going to win this game. They have an explosive offense, as we saw last week. They were able to keep up with New Orleans for pretty much the full 60 minutes. Jacksonville is certainly not a high-octane offense. The defense should be good. It didn't look great last week against Kansas City, but the Chiefs have a way of doing that to teams. Texans are at home this week. I feel pretty good about it. I would take the Texans and the points.
Finally, for Rick, his favorite would be the Buffalo Bills, who are circling the wagons and visiting the New York Giants. Bills favored by 1.5 points. Really small spread this week. Rick, which New York team comes with the win? The one based in New York or the one based in New Jersey?
First of all, Buffalo's the only New York team in the NFL. Let's make that clear. Let's get that straight. Second of all, who hasn't heard of Minshew in the stash? He was a stud at Washington State. Third of all, 1.5 points. Are you kidding me? Did you see what the Giants lost by? They were terrible. They have no defense. And their offensive line, once again, showed that, they're average at best. They have Saquon Barkley, and that's it. If Manning gets enough time to throw the ball to Ingram, that's about all he's going to be able to accomplish. He had decent stats, but Buffalo's defense showed last week how I've been saying this all off season. I've been saying it on the podcast. Buffalo's going to have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They proved it last week. They literally proved it last week by shutting down a Jets team who got 4 turnovers in the first half. Giants aren't going to get 4 turnovers in the first half. Giants will probably turn the ball over 4 times this game. As long as they contain my favorite player, Saquon Barkley, Buffalo should win by double digits. The 1.5 point spread is absurd. I would hammer that. I'm going to hammer that. Buffalo wins this game probably 24-10.
I hope you enjoyed that segment from the Odds On Favorites podcast. If you did, there's plenty more where that came from. Click on the link on your screen now to be taken to the complete podcast from this week, or check out the channel to find the other individual segments. And make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for plenty more sports and sports betting picks, tips, and how-to guides.